So last time I gave a BBC, I was suggesting that it's useful, it has been useful for me, and you might want to think about finding a topic that has a lot of meaning to you and staying with it for a long time on a daily basis, even if just a short period of time. And I was talking about a topic that I worked on back in 2015 for, I think, 2 years every day, which was about having opinions and sharing opinions. And I had a fair amount of feedback about this one. Wonder why. But anyway, the reason I chose that back then was because it was causing me suffering, and I recognized that. But my main point of this talk actually is that by staying with something for a long time, we actually, said this to somebody maybe this morning or yesterday, when I first met the Dharma through live teachings with Venerable Chodron, I had this image in my mind of like the Dharma like pouring into me, but there being like this strainer inside where I had to catch all of my garbage and kind of like strain it out, you know. And I've always kind of had that image of it's just like the Dharma is like pouring in, you know, like they have the 3 pots, you know, and it's trying to pour into you, but it mixes up with my pre-existing ways of thinking, views, whatever, and I have to kind of sieve that out and get rid of it. So what I feel like if we stay with a topic for a long time, what it allows us to do is then align ourselves with our speech and our mind, and hopefully our body already is, with the Dharma. And so I find this to be helpful. And so getting back to opinions, I wanted to share a little bit more about that. Basically, sometimes I think it's helpful, sometimes not, sometimes needed, sometimes not, to share them. And so I want to clarify, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have opinions and we shouldn't share our opinions at all. Actually, we need to have decisive ideas and decisive action many times. And actually, oftentimes people really do want and need, you know, information from other people and opinions and whatever, so to help with a situation or an issue. And then again, when you're collaborating with people, the more ideas that you can, it's hard to manage too many, but the more ideas that you can entertain, oftentimes the best solutions that you'll come to. So these are times where it should be shared, I think. But then there can be some times where there are disadvantages. And so what I decided to do is I do have things where not every time and not every situation, but I do ask myself questions. And so that's what I thought I would share with you. Like, what questions might I ask myself before I decide if an opinion will be useful or not? So that's the basic thing that I'm going to share. So the first one is, what is my motivation? Why am I actually going to speak? And what is my mind like? Am I calm, or is there like this urge inside? I want to say something. And why? Why do I have this urge? You know, like just what is going on inside of me, and what is my motivation? That's a really good place to start. And am I trying to achieve anything? Maybe I'm not, you know. Am I doing to, or who am I trying to benefit? Am I trying to benefit myself? Because I just need to like kind of get something out of me, like cathartic, or am I trying to benefit someone else? Why would I share? Why would I speak? Or why might I not? And those things do come up because a lot of times we need to think about, is this the right time and place and situation? Because that has a lot to do with how things are going to unfold. And it might be nice to ask yourself, is anyone interested? Because actually, they might not be. It'd be good to be aware of that before you start speaking. And am I well informed? Or am I in a situation where I'm kind of just jumping to some kind of opinion about something without really not knowing much about something? You know, maybe so many things can happen that way. Something reverberates in you from the past, and all of a sudden you bring that to the present, and you might not even be aware of that, and you're off to the races, and pretty soon you're in deep trouble. So those kind of things, you know, like, but am I well informed, or am I jumping to a conclusion? You can see how a lot of ways these things could play out. Is what I'm going to say something that will contribute to a solution? Will it contribute to harmony? Will it contribute to connection? And how might I share what I want to say in a way that it can be heard? This, I actually think, is where, personally, I've learned a lot from studying the nonviolent communication, because they teach you so much about word choices. And oftentimes, I think before I studied NVC, I have to say, a lot of times the way I express myself, because this is how I was taught, this is actually the words that our society uses many times, are words that are kind of diagnostic sometimes. They can be received as diagnostic, judgmental, all kind of things that don't help the other person to hear what you're saying. That's kind of the issue. Well, if I'm going to share something, you want somebody to be able to listen and hear it and not react to it. And our word choices make a big difference with that. It helps somebody to be able to listen to what you're going to say if you can choose words that they can hear and still get your point across. And I think the nonviolent communication is particularly helpful at helping us to discern what kind of language we get ourselves in trouble with. And word choices in many fronts, they have a lot of exercises about that. And then there's the question, which we learned in some of our Vinaya training. I think it was Venerable Jindi who said, you know, when you're trying to, say, mentor someone or help someone, are you actually the person that should be speaking with them? Because oftentimes it'd be better if someone else did. They might be able to hear that person better. That other person might have a better connection. There might be a reason why someone else would be a better person to do this. And then the last couple things I thought about were ones that are a little different from these preceding ones. But one is, am I joining into a situation of what I would call group think? I think actually oftentimes that is something that we're propelled to in certain times because we want to be a part of something. And we'll actually sometimes compromise our values even to be a part of something. I actually think there's a lot of, I've heard some stories recently about people who, I don't know, maybe they're living by their values, but there was a long story about, I think it's the voting situation in Arizona, where it's a quite divided state, where one person is really working on this issue because it's creating such meaning in their lives. But to me, what they're joining into in terms of how they're thinking about it is quite concerning, though. But I can see where people join movements, and what can be happening even in our society right now is because people find meaning in what they're doing. They believe in what they're doing. For me, a lot of what's going on in our country right now doesn't align with my values. I wouldn't want to get sucked into things that, I think that can happen. I think that Venerable Chodron gave us some articles years ago, and there's been research on this, where we have certain values, but actually it's easy in certain specific situations for us to compromise our own values for our own self-interest, whereas we wouldn't in another situation. But when I'm involved and it has something to do with me, now I can find kind of a way to wiggle out of things, and I might, and this is just something we have to be on guard for. So I think where situations come down to group think, I think we have to at least kind of step back a little bit and, you know, like, what is really going on here? What am I joining into? And the last one that came to mind just a couple days ago was, say a person wants your opinion on something. Is that person actually abrogating any of their responsibilities? Because this does happen where, I've watched this with Venerable Chodron sometimes when she's teaching, and actually people want some kind of, they have a conflict and they want to be like absolved, like in the Catholic Church, the Pope kind of sweeps in and can absolve you of things, and that doesn't work this way in Buddhism, but I've witnessed this happen, and you've spoken about this before. Actually, there are situations where a person wants you to do something where they're actually abrogating the responsibility. They have responsibilities, and you can be stepping in a way that isn't actually good for them. And you might be doing it in a way that isn't actually good for you either. Because we have learned, and it's been helpful for me to understand that sometimes when I step into other people's situations where they need to be taking responsibility for something and I take that over, it's kind of like one of these codependent situations. I'm actually not taking responsibility for something within myself in those moments. And that's been my lesson in those situations. Like, there's something to be learned here. So I think that, these are the kind of reflections, these are kind of varied, but this is what happens if you look at a topic for a long period of time. And that's basically what I wanted to share, is like, there may be things that you see that, we're taught to work with the biggest afflictions first, the things that are really impacting our lives. And within that, there are going to be these subsets of, for me, it was this idea of opinions and when to share them and when not. But by reflecting on this for a long period of time, it's helped me to learn different scenarios where these things pop up in my life, and to be able to try to clean those up, essentially.